Welcome to Vitality Made Simple, the podcast that empowers you to feel better, look better, and to have better relationships, to more fully enjoy your relationships. That's what it's all about. I'm your host, Dr. Debbie Osment, and I sincerely thank you for joining me. We're going to have some fun today. It's a real pleasure to welcome Danny Grannick. He is the CEO and co-founder of Bristle Health, and he's going to tell you all about that. And you're going to leave today even wanting more. Danny is curious. He's creative. He's super smart, and he's also very practical in developing things that we can use to have authentic anti-aging, to have vitality from the inside out. He and his team have created a simple home test that can really monitor your health. I hope in the future this will be as basic as getting your blood sugar checked a couple of times a year, because it's all about health span. We want to live a long life, but we want to live a life of vitality. We want a long health span, not just a long lifespan. Danny's a biochemist, and he's committed to quality. I think you're going to be so impressed with this company they've developed. I say it over and over that vitality doesn't need to be confusing, expensive, or no fun. And Bristle Health absolutely epitomizes that. So welcome, Danny. I'm so glad to have you today.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Tell us about Bristle Health. Tell us about your journey in the creation of this incredible company.
Yeah, so Bristle Health is an oral health company. So we developed a test where we take a sample of saliva and we look at the oral microbiome. So the microbiome is broadly the collection of fungi, viruses, bacteria, all kinds of microbes that live on or within a part of your body. So we have skin microbiomes, we have gut microbiomes, and you also have an oral microbiome. So a makeup of all of these microbes that live inside of your mouth. And some of these microbes are beneficial and they help us fight disease and keep us healthy, and other ones are pathogenic and can cause disease. So when we think about the oral microbiome, things that might come to mind are conditions like cavities, gum disease, bad breath. And our test takes a saliva sample and we look at all of the microbes in your mouth. And based on that information, we're able to give you insights about your oral health status and your risk for various conditions. And then based on those results, we give you personalized recommendations or care plan, including dietary changes, oral care products, and a hygiene routine to rebalance the oral microbiome and get you back to a state of health. So the company was started, it's still young, it's about 2.5 years old, but our team comes from the genomics industry, and we had really seen genomics do wonderful things in the areas of oncology, NIPT, the gut microbiome. There was a shift in the way that we were approaching medical care, going from reactive standard to more proactive measures, right? Really trying to prevent the onset of disease. And my now co-founder is somewhat of a cliche kind of patient who had cavities every time he saw the dentist and had no idea why. And that set us off on a journey to really understand the root cause of oral health and disease and develop better tools to help people understand and improve their oral health.
I'm so impressed with your foresight because, as a clinician for, 38 years almost, this is such a gap. And for our listeners, the amazing thing about Bristol Health is that it really empowers you. It puts it in your hands. You don't have to search and search for a dentist who is interested and excited about balancing the oral microbiome. You can test yourself. This is so thrilling, Danny. I can't thank you enough. This is truly upstream medicine. And in your journey, what have you found in terms of diseases that the oral microbiome impacts?
Yeah, so I think we can split it up into two buckets. So the first is kind of the role of oral microbiome in oral health and disease. And the US Surgeon General actually put out a paper, I think last year. It was kind of a 20-year revision of oral health in America, right? Looking at kind of the
Mm.
latest technologies, what the standard of care looks like. And I think in that paper, I'm going to butcher it a little bit, but he talks about the fact that the three kind of most prominent oral diseases, periodontal disease, cavities or caries, and oral cancer, all have an underlying microbial driver. So, in the most literal sense, the oral microbiome is a causative factor in the most prominent oral diseases. When you think about cavities, those are rooted in, they're called acetogenic or cariogenic bacteria. And what those bacteria do is when you eat things like carbohydrates or sugars, they metabolize those compounds and they produce acids. And the acid erodes your enamel, which leads to tooth decay, which eventually, when you go in for an x-ray, results in a cavity. And similar mechanisms occur with periodontal disease and a whole range of oral diseases, including halitosis, oral thrush. We're starting to look at burning mouth syndrome,
Oh,
but
good.
the oral microbiome is really the foundation of oral health. And then in the second bucket, you have this really interesting relationship between oral and overall health. So starting to understand, why is it that declining oral health has been correlated and associated with things like cognitive decline or increased risk of cardiovascular disease or mismanaged diabetes. And there is kind of this biological underpinning where a lot of the pathogenic microbes in our mouths can migrate to other parts of our bodies and cause issues there as well. There have been, probably the most noteworthy study was, I think in 2016, there was a paper that looked at patients with Alzheimer's, and they were able to find P. gingivalis, kind of a
Oh,
keystone periodontal pathogen in the brains of these Alzheimer's patients. And since that landmark paper, there have actually been two therapeutics companies that have come to market targeting specifically either P. gingivalis itself or some byproduct of P. gingivalis, not to treat periodontal disease, but actually to slow the progression of Alzheimer's itself. So that connection is very real, between our mouths and the rest of our bodies.
no, it really is, Danny. Most of my patients are physician referrals. So, one physician is a cardiologist who utilizes the Bredesen protocol. So, we see P. gingivalis very commonly in people who are suffering from memory decline, and that's a vicious circle at that point. Once they have memory decline, they usually have more problems keeping their mouth clean, and so that's where I think your company is so key. If we can find it early, it's one of the holes in the roof that we can solve for all of these different systemic problems. One of the biggest problems I've always seen with periodontal disease is that it's painless. And so, we naturally gravitate toward lesser pain. And that's one of the big gaps you're bridging, because we don't want to wait till it hurts. We don't want to wait till people are sick or have, Alzheimer's disease or colon cancer or pregnancy loss or, out of rampant blood sugar. We can see these things and predict early, right? So when someone gets a test done, it's a simple saliva test. What are they going to see on their report?
Yeah. So the report, like I said, so I guess discussing the technology behind the test, we use a method, and I won't go too much into the technical details, but we use a method called shotgun metagenomics. And the reason why that's really important is because the oral microbiome is super diverse and really, really complex. There are over 700 bacterial species that have been associated with the oral microbiome, and as many, if not more, fungi and viruses, right? So there's a lot to look at, and each one of those microbes can play an influential role in our health or our risk for disease. So understanding exactly what's there is really important, and that's what our test allows us to do. We look at the entire oral microbiome, and we identify and quantify all of those microbes to understand kind of what the community looks like for a person. So the test, will report on everything that we detect, right? And we've done a lot of work in curating research and writing up descriptions of the role that all of these different microbes play in your mouth. So you're able to kind of click in and see, if you test positive for P. gingivalis, what conditions is that implicated in? What does it do? How does it work? Um, and you'll also receive scores for your oral health and risk for various conditions. So everything from the bacteria that we detect related to conditions like cavities, halitosis, periodontal disease, all the way through the beneficial bacteria as well. So you'll receive insights into the commensal bacteria. So again, kind of those traditionally beneficial species, and then subsets of that as well. So we recently released a nitrate reduction score, and that looks at a subset of beneficial bacteria that play a role in converting nitrate into nitric oxide. And nitric oxide is this super important molecule for our overall health. It helps us kind of regulate blood pressure. It's associated with lower risk for hypertension and cardiovascular disease. And the oral microbiome plays a really important role in that. So you'll get all of these different insights, and we provide easy scoring, 0 to 10, right? In some cases, higher is worse. In other cases, like for the beneficial bacteria, higher is better. And based on those results, you'll get a bunch of recommendations, including, again, diet, oral care products, hygiene routines, some educational information as well, with the goal of rebalancing your oral microbiome to get you into a really balanced and healthy state.
I love the idea that you're rebalancing and that you're also measuring the good bacteria. That's just a whole new thing. I don't know that that's happening anywhere else. I got to know Dr. Nathan Bryan at the University of Texas in San Antonio, and he's done a lot of study on nitric oxide. So I'm very impressed that you're dealing with that. As my listeners know, I did a couple of podcasts way back on nitric oxide. Mouthwashes that kill everything inhibit nitric oxide, and nitric oxide is one of the things that gives you energy. It helps regulate blood pressure. It does all kinds of things. So when people are using these high powered mouthwashes, they think they're doing themselves a good job, but indeed they're actually causing bigger downstream problems. So that's just incredible. Also, Danny, a lot of these microbes are transmissible, transkissable, I say. And so, they're contagious. I mean, some of the things like P. gingivalis, that's implicated in Alzheimer's disease, there's other bacteria that are considered to be red complex bacteria that lots of people have, and they're transmissible. I always say I'm very happy I didn't know this in high school. So, people can pass them on. So therefore, I recommend generally with my patients that they have their significant other tested, because you're going to see a lot of things that both people have in even just in genomics in general. People that live together start to look alike, and I think it's because of a lot of these bacteria that they have. Do you
I
see
totally
that, or
agree.
is there any data that you can
Yeah, yeah. So we do see a lot of similarities between partners living together. We also see a lot of similarities. There have been a couple really exciting studies looking at parents and children. So there is a lot of research that points to the child's oral microbiome kind of being seeded by the parents. So we talk about nature versus nurture, right? And I think that that's especially true for oral health, where there's obviously a nurture component where you want to make sure that you instill good behaviors and good practices, but there is also this nature component where um, the predispositions or the oral microbiome imbalances in the parents can certainly have an influence and an effect on the child's oral microbiome and their future risk for oral conditions.
That's so good, because people I see, they'll have, say, type 2 diabetes, and they'll say, well, it runs in my family. Well, actually, what mostly runs in their family are habits. The foods they eat, the activities they do. So it's really similar with this. When you see this at a family reunion, this aunt come and slobber all over your child, I mean, you're gonna freak out probably, because I didn't know this when my kids were little, but people are transferring their oral bugs to whoever they're kissing on, or sharing a fork, a bite of something on a fork. I mean, it's really empowering for people to know. Now, in your research, I would suspect that you're looking at so many things besides just the microbiome. You're looking at habits of people, and this technology in my world will really help people be more discerning about their dentist. I mean, dentistry have been a dentist a long time, and love the profession. We are trained to be very reactive rather than proactive. Could you speak to this, Danny?
Yeah. So I guess when I think about reactive medicine, I think about it in terms of when we detect and diagnose disease and kind of like what that means in terms of treatment. So when we think about, the typical dental visit today, I go into the dentist and generally I'll receive an X-ray that looks for existing decay in my teeth, and I'll receive an observational screening that looks for the physical presence and severity of symptoms in my mouth. Um, and that's a very late stage diagnosis, right? It's kind of, to use maybe a pretty serious example, but it's like looking for tumors to indicate whether or not cancer is present. And
Right.
we've put so much effort into developing tools to do early detection of
Mhm.
mutated DNA so that we can enable more proactive care. But dental care is largely in the same place, right? We're waiting until disease has manifested to then diagnose it. And when you already have disease, your options are pretty limited in terms of what you can do to address it. It's going to be removing diseased tissue. It's going to be, antibiotics. These relatively like harsh, physical, expensive, and painful procedures, and that is the standard dental care model. I go to the dentist and I get an X-ray. I find out I have a cavity, and I have to go back in a week or 2 weeks and get a cavity filling or root canal because the disease has progressed so far. When I think in contrast, when I think about a proactive or a preventive model, it's early detection of disease, really looking at the root cause agents and being able to predict my risk or let me know that, hey, we've found the earliest signs of disease while it's still manageable, and then making fundamental changes in what I do to address it. And it also, I think, just expands the number of options in clinic to get ahead of it, and it informs decision making on the provider side as
Mhm.
well. If I know, and let me caveat this, I am not a provider, but like as a provider, I would imagine if I knew that one of my patients was at risk for a certain condition, I'm going to have them maybe come in a bit more frequently for checkups to monitor the progression of that condition or just make sure that we're keeping things managed. I'm going to really make sure that they have a good at-home routine and that they're leveraging, whatever tools they have at their disposal to manage their health. I'm going to make sure that they're aware of what symptoms they have to look out for so that if anything comes up, they know who to contact. And then in terms of care that can be provided, it opens the door to less invasive procedures, less invasive treatments that are all focused on preventing the progression of disease instead of reactively treating it.
Well, I would have you be my doctor for sure, because that is a very um, logical mindset, but a very rare mindset. Unfortunately, in our insurance-driven system right now, um, we're not really trained to look preventively as in depth as this. Um, and I think this has to be a real grassroots effort. I think it has to be patient driven. When patients take your test to their dentist and say, this matters to me, and I know it matters to me because maybe I have a family history of colon cancer, maybe I am concerned about memory loss, maybe I have a lot of pregnancy loss. These oral microbiome, my oral micro edit this, Mike. These oral microbes really impact fertility. They impact miscarriage rate. They impact low birth weight. So, this is reaching into eternity, Danny, from the way I see it. If we can help people understand that it's not only preventing problems, but it's also living with more energy. It's going to be better sleep. The oral microbiome so heavily impacts the gut microbiome, and your test actually looks at gut health. Tell us about
Yeah,
that.
yeah. So similar to the nitrate reduction score, there are a subset of bacteria that reside in our oral microbiome. And I keep coming back to P. gingivalis just because it is kind of that, one of those notoriously pathogenic microbes. But there's a subset of bacteria in the oral microbiome that can uh, translocate down to the gut, right? So they
Mm-hmm.
can kind of make their way through the digestive system and can
Mm-hmm.
withstand the change in environment, and they can cause dysbiosis in the gut. And they've been associated with conditions like IBS, IBD, Crohn's disease, colorectal cancer. F nucleatum is kind of the notorious pathogen there. So, for a lot of people suffering from gut related issues, they've taken gut microbiome tests, and maybe they've tried to tackle it from, for lack of a better word, that end of things.
Right.
But in some cases, those conditions really originate from dysbiosis in the mouth, and getting yourself back to a good state of oral health is actually, one of the more impactful steps that you can take to reset your gut as well.
Oh, exactly, Danny. In my practice, I see a lot of gut dysbiosis. I say I love to deal with poop, but so when somebody is sent to me, say from a functional medicine doctor, they may have a GI map which shows F nucleatum, Fusobacterium nucleatum, and then I test their oral microbiome, and 100% of the time they have high Fusobacterium nucleatum in their mouth too. Now we have learned, and the practitioners in town, we've learned together that until we address it in the mouth, it will not be resolved in the gut. Even with antibiotics, it will go away and they'll feel better for maybe 3 months. But until the mouth is addressed, there's not going to be really any healing. And for our listeners, I love to talk about Fusobacterium. I call it the mother-in-law bacteria because it's a commensal bacteria. At high levels, it's a big problem, just like a mother-in-law. And at low levels, it can almost be a beneficial in some terms. So it's really important to know, because we're also finding some recent studies that it exacerbates not just colon cancer but breast cancer. It makes P. gingivalis much more virulent. It's has the capacity to produce adhesins. So it's just one of those, like your mother-in-law stays too long, it's going to make everything worse in your house. And that's what Fusobacterium nucleatum does. So very, very impressive that you're giving people some gut measurement, because they may not have a physician who's testing for the gut health too. So
Totally.
many. Oh, I'm sorry.
And
Go
I
ahead.
I love I loved your I love the mother-in-law term, because I think it brings up a really important point, which is the oral microbiome is a community and it's all about balance. And that doesn't necessarily mean, you know, a, a scorched earth strategy for pathogenic bacteria. In small
Yeah.
amounts, a lot of these
Right.
pathogens can actually be beneficial. Candida fungi in very small amounts is beneficial to
Mhm.
the oral microbiome's health. Same thing with a lot of those notorious pathogenic bacteria. So yeah, I love the analogy.
Well, and it's just so easily undiagnosed. I think so many things we settle for being normal. I have that thing I say, normal is irritated, constipated, dehydrated, all those bad things. Normal really just means whatever is typical at the time in our society. And people being stressed out, people being not rested, those can be the typical situation in a society. And bleeding gums are right there. And even getting cavities, oh, well, look, mom, I only had one cavity. That's an old commercial that when I was young, that one of the toothpaste companies put out. Oh, only one cavity. And now I look back and go, gee whiz, every 6 months, only one cavity. That's the people that are in trouble now. So it doesn't have to be that way. also, we want to use all the tools we possibly can for figuring these things out. So with as a clinician, I can look at bleeding. All bleeding is bad in the gums. There's no bleeding that's normal. Well, it might be normal, but it's not optimal. We want to go for optimal. I also, look at the probing depths around the teeth. If listeners, when you go to the dentist once a year, you should be getting a comprehensive periodontal exam, and that's measuring around each tooth. That's standard of care. And then you should also, of course, you're going to have some radiographs, but now you can add to this a bristle test. And you do that on your own. You don't have to ask your dentist for it. You do it on your own, and then what you have going on in your mouth, and you go prepared to the dentist. So then when you get there, if they look at it and say, "Oh, I don't know anything about this," well, you want to find a dentist who's curious and who wants to keep learning. That's key. None of us know everything, but we should want to keep learning. So if you find that your dental team sort of blows that off, then you might want to find a new dental team, because this is root cause health. What's going on in your mouth is not only going to potentially cause you pain, but it also impacts your insulin resistance. It impacts your lipid panel. It impacts your sleep, your gut health, your skin vitality. It impacts your brain. Of course, Danny's already talked about that. And you don't even have to have full blown Alzheimer's disease. I see a lot of people who have high pathogen counts in their mouth, and they just are having brain fog. And so, that clears up a lot when we get their mouth healthy and their gut healthy and their inflammation comes down and their blood sugar regulates. It's just all so exciting.
I completely agree. It's great to see more people taking, we use the word proactive a lot, but like a proactive role in their health. And I think that it's it's really important in dental care, and for people, if people are looking for a dental team that uses Bristle or has an interest, we're happy to do the legwork and find those providers. And if your dentist, for the audience out there, if they're interested, then we're happy to train. We want to educate and empower as many people, including patients and including providers, as possible to leverage this really impactful tool.
Yeah, if you're new to Vitality Made Simple, listen to my podcast. It's called The Forgotten Orifice. And I really named it that sort of, as a joke. I was in a functional medicine master's program that was in a medical school. And so we had to write like 29 case histories. And each time I would incorporate the oral microbiome into my case history. But even though it was a fantastic program, they never talked about the mouth from the standpoint of the oral microbiome. They would talk about maybe biological dentistry or heavy metals, but not microbial. So sort of as, I named my thesis, The Forgotten Orifice. And so that's how the TED Talk came up. But people will say, "Oh, I saw your TED Talk, the missing orifice or the lonely orifice or the hidden orifice," and it's like, that's really like, no, it's the forgotten orifice. And it is,
Yeah,
it so is. And I had a quote in it that says, because gum disease affects 80% of the global population, I'm convinced that it's the largest, most underdiagnosed, undertreated, communicable disease in the world. And it really is, Danny. I mean, and that's what you're addressing.
I totally agree. And I think the other important thing here is when we talk about diagnosing and characterizing oral disease, it actually, the way that we diagnose it today, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but for periodontal disease, right? Like again, we look at the symptoms and we use that to guide kind of a diagnosis or a rating for the severity of periodontal disease, but that's kind of where it stops. And it looks a lot like I think oncology did like 20 years ago, where we would use physiological locations, right, to describe the kind of cancer. That's where the term breast cancer comes from, right? Because
Mhm.
Cancer, in or around the
Oh,
breast, colorectal cancer, cancer found in the colon. I And what we've seen when genomics was introduced to oncology is the shift to molecular characterization, because that's really looking at the drivers of the disease and understanding, okay, this tumor is driven by a KRAS mutation, and because we have that molecular understanding, it opens up more precise treatments and uh, yeah, more precise treatment options that we can use to address that root cause. And I think what I would love to see is kind of a shift in dental care towards that same mentality, where we move away from pocket depths or just periodontal disease as this umbrella term being the way that we diagnose conditions, and really focusing on what is driving that disease. There's a
mhm.
difference in the way that we should approach P. gingivalis driven periodontal disease versus
Right.
F. nucleatum driven periodontal disease. And I think it's a really important difference to make. With halitosis in our research, we've been able to identify these six-ish buckets of halitosis that are all driven by very different kinds of microbes, right? So we see that some people with halitosis have an overabundance of bacteria that grow on the tongue, right? So they're tongue coating bacteria, and that's where the majority is coming from. Other people have an overabundance of periodontal disease related bacteria, and that's what's driving their halitosis. Other people have fungi, and we've developed very precise care plans for each bucket of halitosis. And I think that we can do the same thing with all oral diseases. It just starts with a much better understanding of like what's causing that disease in the first place.
Exactly. And you're gonna get a personalized plan from Bristol when you get your test. Now, I'm gonna do I have a video and of me doing the test. And when I get my results, I'm going to do another video and show you all what I'm seeing, because even though I'm picky about my mouth, I suspect there's going to be some things I want to know so that I can be proactive there. Uh, The thing too, Danny, is that, dentistry has progressed so much to be about cosmetics. And while that's a person's personal choice, what I've seen clinically is maybe they've had these beautiful veneers placed and they've spent $20,000 getting those veneers. And, but their gums are, they've got periodontal disease. And so, their gums are shrinking away from the veneers and everything's, um, potentially decaying. And so folks, this is again root cause. If you're going to spend money on dentistry, this is basic. It's going to increase your dental implant outcomes, to to know what's going on in your mouth and to know exactly how to treat it. And Danny, I actually did a test about 6 months ago, so I'm going to be redoing it um, on camera. But it's not difficult. Like the suggestions they give, they're not confusing, they're not expensive, and they're fun. They are fun because you're going to feel the difference. That's what's so exciting, because down the road, downstream, these things are confusing, they're very expensive, and it's not fun at the dental office.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think, the cosmetic side of dentistry, we see it a lot in other industries as well. Like I think the skin industry is full of kind of a cosmetic first approach, and
Yeah.
that's fine. Go try to get pearly white teeth, try to have fresh breath. There's nothing wrong with that. Just know that that doesn't necessarily mean that you have good oral health, right? So do those things, but be cognizant of what your health status actually is, because that's the thing that in 5 years and 10 years and 6 months could manifest as something really, really bad, and can really um, throw your health and your life off track.
Well, there's numbers to know when you go and get blood tests. There's things like your fasting blood glucose, your say low density lipoproteins. You want to know your waist circumference. You want to, there's all these numbers to know that I talk about that indicate metabolic health. So now we're going to add we're going to add a Bristle health test to this every 6 months, because it's going to save you so much money, I believe, to have this early intervention. And it's really just a mindset shift to know that it matters. And Danny, you've helped us today to clarify how much it matters. It's so wonderful to see it coming from someone like you, who is young and brilliant and looking into the future. It's so different than coming from, oh yeah, this dentist. So thank you for that. Thank you for your
No, thank
innovation.
you.
And thank you for your creativity. Thank you for your time. How can people find you, and what would you suggest?
Yeah, so anybody can go to bristlehealth.com to learn more about the company. I suggest that people go check out our blog. There's a lot of educational content that we've put together, and there's also a lot of interesting internal data that we've kind of written blog articles on, everything from electric versus manual brushing and that impact on the oral microbiome to flossing. Um, you can follow us on any of the social media channels. So I think it's all at Bristle Health. Um, and yeah, just any kind of support. We do a lot of educational emails and newsletters, so feel free to sign up for that. And then obviously I encourage everybody to get a test and get a good idea of what their oral microbiome looks like and get on track to better oral health.
Well, and you've been kind enough for our listeners to give a discount code. You can just go to Bristol Health and put in Vitality 15. That's all caps VITALITY 15. And you'll get $15 off of an already very affordable test. I think you're going to be very surprised when you see the price. I was absolutely astounded. And Bristle Health is BRISTLE Health. So check it out. They do have incredible resources and absolutely the best customer service I have experienced.
Thank you.
I mean, it's amazing, Danny. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You get a response. I mean, you get people. It's incredible. I mean, you all have done a great job. I want to shout out to Shivam. He's just such a important part of your team. You all are very, very impressive. And I thank you for your time. Check out Bristle Health, and thank you for joining me for Vitality Made Simple. We're now in 81 countries and over 1,400 cities, and that's all organic growth thanks to you all. Thank you, listeners. Keep sharing, keep subscribing, and just go for root cause health. Be proactive, be the boss of your own body. Thanks for joining me. Blessings until next time.